So, as we talk about big events, and then we're going to get into training today, I do want to talk about TFA Exchange for a minute. So I was on a call, yes, a planning call with the committee that's organizing that. And guys, I'm really, really excited for TFA Exchange this year. And to give you a little backstory on that, 2 years ago was, to be candid, I would consider it a pretty disastrous event on many levels. The way it was run, the agenda, the speakers, just so many things that just weren't really optimal at that event. Still had some highlights, still had a good time, still whatever, but like it just wasn't what the event should be. Last year was the first year with our new executive leadership, but some of them were like brand new, and they joined us too late in the game to be able to really modify the agenda. These events, I mean, they're planned out in some cases 6 to 12 months in advance. I mean, everything from locking down the dates in the hotel and all that, but then you got to get to the vendors, and these are national level contacts to get bigger sponsorship, participations, bigger dollars. And then all those vendors want speaking slots, in exchange for the dollars or contributing to the event. And you can imagine. So last year basically we took a pretty rigid agenda and we added what we could, we modified what we could, but so much of it was set in stone. And the commitment was this year we're going to, kind of reimagine what this event could be. And so from a structure standpoint, it's going to feel very similar to what you've experienced. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, kind of that October 20th to the 22nd. And again, you have to have a Series 6 at least to go. And I don't know. I'd have to double check if they're going to allow, if you have like a U4 submitted, if they're going to let you in. I can get back with you on that. But so it's definitely securities only training. There's just a lot of regulatory issues for that. But what the agenda, here's what's going to be similar about it. It's going to have like general session on Monday afternoon. And then, Tuesday is going to be the breakout rotation all day, and then Wednesday morning will be another general session. But what's happening within those sessions is going to be dramatically different. So, we're going to have the right speakers with the right energy from the home office down to field leaders on main stage. And so I think that's going to be really well designed with a very specific, sequencing of messages. The breakouts are going to be entirely different. And so we're really finally pivoting away from basically a bunch of product provider commercials to product providers are sponsoring all the breakouts, and they might have a 10-minute little deal in the beginning or the end of each session, depending on the session, but they're going to be much more field led. And so we're going to have field leaders in every breakout, either giving talks or on a panel. It's going to be a lot more interactive. It's going to be a lot more relevant to what you guys all want to hear, and who you want to hear from. And I put myself in the shoes of where I was at 15 years ago. And I mean, I would have given anything to be able to like hear how, certain big leaders run their trainings, and how do you recruit people, and how do you fast start people, and how do you train people on, I mean, all that stuff, right? And how do you present fidelity, and how, so it's going to be really, really informative, and I think a lot more relevant to what people are looking for. And so I'm really excited for just the value and the content you're going to have there. They're going to beef up recognition, and then to be determined. I think there'll be a kind of a cocktail reception on the first night, and then there's gonna be some opportunities for dinners. And so I know some of you are already committed, and I don't even know if registration's out for it actually yet. But I think that'll be coming here soon. But my tickets are booked, my flights, I'll do my hotel with my registration. But anyways, I'm just really excited about that event, and we'll make sure we get a couple good team dinners there, because I'm just in Vegas 2 nights. I'm just flying in Monday morning and flying out Wednesday afternoon. So it's a really easy event to get in and get out of, and I just can't recommend that enough for everybody that's securities licensed. So anyways, I'll have more to share on that. We got some kind of a sequence of calls coming up the next couple of weeks. But I would book your flights, and I'll post my flights on the group page here today, just so even if you're coming in on different airports, you just kind of know kind of what we're doing. Anyways, super pumped about that. But in terms of training today, I want to have Alec cover most of the training and get into Pension Max and really the kind of the inspiration for this. One, we want to kind of move into permanent life insurance and spend some time on that the next couple of weeks. But a lot of the work we do with permanent life insurance are when people have these pensions and survivorship options because it really incorporates this permanent life insurance need so much. And so Alec has a case he's been working on. We kind of went through the analysis a bit last week together. He presented it last night to the prospect, and he says it went fairly well. And so I'm going to have him kind of take over here and talk about the idea of, you know, what the case was, just isolating this one factor and kind of how his thought process is, and a little bit about how he presented it conceptually. We probably don't have time today to get into the illustration. That's almost like a whole separate functions. Function one is kind of identifying how much life insurance do we need and why do we need it? And why does it need to be permanent versus term? So that whole concept. And then getting into the actual, okay, now that we know that, here's how we're designing the product illustration. So Alec, do you want to kind of take over here and get into your training?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to preface before I dive in, even on for the recording here today. I told Tyson before this is an opportunity for me to get some free coaching from Tyson, and Ryan will be able to speak to a lot of this as well. So I haven't done much of any pension maximization cases in my career. And so in this scenario, this is kind of newer for me. All of that being said, I'm a little rusty. This isn't a term life insurance policy and open a Roth IRA from scratch. And so I might say some things today that you might see, hey, you know what? I'm actually learning a little bit here. So, my hope is to maybe show you guys where I'm at currently in my business, but also what I identified. And then from there, kind of how we're going to help this client moving forward. So, cutting to, kind of the meat potatoes of this. This is a friend of mine. He's worked his entire career in the Army. And so he's getting ready to retire at the beginning of October. And in this scenario, he came to me and said, hey, this has been identified on my plate since about January of this year, if not even further. Hey, I'm getting ready to retire from the military. I've got a $400,000 policy, so that'll fall off. So is that like, can you do a $400,000 term policy for me? But that was back in January. We cut to maybe about a month ago, maybe about 6 weeks ago. Him and I spent some time together and got talking about his pension. And he had said, hey, I really don't know how any of this stuff works. I actually only get a single life option. And so I was like, hey, man, we need to seriously meet and talk about some of this stuff. You need to know what your pension is and how it works. There's a lot of implications that come into this. So 2 weeks ago, we had our first meeting. And to give you some of the numbers, we had walked through kind of what his pension looks like. He's going to get a VA benefit of some kind for disability. But ultimately, we're looking just at this isolated pension. So, we sometimes tell people, say that people are kind of low technology or low tech. And in this scenario, they just really had no clue what was going on. They didn't have any statements. And so, but that's okay. But they were able to give me a couple initial numbers, and we're kind of walking through this process together. And so they told me that his base pension is going to be about $3,400 to $3,500 a month. And then they said there's a survivorship option that would be about $1,900 a month if you were to pass away first. And it just on this app, it just says that it costs $225 a month. And so when we met a couple of weeks ago, I had kind of asked, are you wanting to do the survivorship, or are you wanting to, kind of learn more about how these benefits work? And there wasn't really a clear answer, but it was identified, hey, you're kind of the expert, you're the person we're coming to. And so what are our options and what can we do to kind of make sure we're doing and putting our best foot forward, and how does it all work? And so that's when I spent some time with Tyson last week and kind of walked through these numbers. So again, walking through these numbers, their base pension's about $3,500 before taxes. And if we were to take a survivorship option, uh, costing about $225 a month, which would drop that payout to about $3,200. If he were to pass away first, his wife would get a benefit of about $1,900. And so Tyson then kind of walked me through some of the numbers of the math of how this worked. And I'll kind of be a little more it's, nuanced here, and then I'll kind of share what I had talked about with the client. And so ultimately, when we can identify a pension max case, what Tyson was saying is, what we want to do is find if we can take that cost of what that survivorship option is, can we go and purchase life insurance that you have control of that we could then go out and buy to replicate that survivorship benefit if in this case, the husband were to pass away first? Can we take that single life option instead of paying into the system that dollar amount and go and purchase life insurance on our own? And so that $1,900, if we were to put that into an annual payout, it's about $22,000 to $23,000 a year. And so in Tyson's case, he had said if we're taking an 8% withdrawal rate, I'll let him kind of talk further on that number that he came to. It's kind of more of an over assumption of a withdrawal rate. What we're looking to do in our scenario is what's a life insurance death benefit that we could give someone that if something were to happen, we could kind of replicate that payout for about 10 to 15 years, depending on kind of stage of life and when something were to take place. But safely to assume, can we get you at least 10 plus years of a payout? And that would give us a long enough time horizon to kind of figure some things out. And so,
Hey, can we pause right there, Alec? So, I want to make sure before we move past this point, that everybody understands what we're trying to accomplish here. So, why maybe take another swing at like why do we even need to do all this work in the first place? If there's already a survivorship option
yeah.
where let's call it, in this case it's the husband with the pension, so that would be called the pensioner, and then the wife is the survivor. So if he dies, she's got, the pension payout the rest of her life. If she dies first, he continues to have his pension. What's the problem with that?
So you said if she were to pass away first?
Well, and just in general, like why do we even need to mess with this whatsoever? What I'm playing devil's advocate here. Why
For
why
sure.
why are we overthinking this? Why are we overcomplicating this?
Yeah, so when we're figuring all of this out, what we're trying to do ultimately is figure out, can we control a lot of what's going on? So in this scenario, this $225 number, we want to have as much control as we can personally. And so when I had talked to the clients last night, I had said, well, hey, if, in this case, the pensioner, if he were to pass away first, we've got some type of a survivorship option, which is great. But, what if he does, if he lives longer, and what if you were to pass away first, this $225, the wife made a comment last night and said, well, he can just turn that off if I passed away first. And I said, no, that's not how this works. Once you make that decision, it's locked in for the rest of your life. And so
And
if she were
even
to
if
pass,
you could turn it off, which some pensions allow what's called revision or
okay,
reversion, but what would be the problem with that?
I don't know.
You've lost all that money. I mean, you've
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
225 a month for 18, 20, 25 years and you have nothing to show for it. So it'd be better to be able to revert. It's called reversion because you could revert up to the full payment if your survivorship person passes away before you, but you've lost all of that money. And by the way, typically when you have reversion, so the STRS lets you do this, you're paying an additional fee for that flexibility. It's a little bit like return of premium term, like you're paying more to have the optionality of making a change down the road. So not to get down on that tangent too far, but it's like that would be the problem with that. And when you interject that, then all of a sudden the client says, "Oh, okay," and you're starting to plant seeds of doubt, like, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with this design, but if we could do it by controlling more cash and we could do it cheaper where both of you benefit more, is that something you'd be open to talking about?" Well, sure, why not? So that's the setup. Yeah. But it's all about control to your point.
Correct. And so that was a big thing that I stressed last night is I said if we were to just take the survivorship option, no matter what scenario, yes, you're getting some type of a benefit, but you have zero control on it and virtually no ability to make revisions or changes later on down the road. And so by utilizing a permanent life insurance policy, it's going to allow for us to have every bit of control and in essence still get the same benefit, if not even better. So in this scenario, conceptually speaking, just like what Tyson was saying, let's say we were to start this policy and 25 years down the road, she passes away first. And so I was able to show them in an illustration, hey, 20 years in, you've paid in this amount of money into this policy, and you have just as much, if not more, that you can just call me up and say, hey, she passed away. We don't really need this anymore. And you can get all this money back. You've put in 50 grand and there's 65,000 in there. You could get a check for that money and get all of that back, and you still have that full pension that you're getting through the military. But then conversely speaking, if something were to happen to him on the front end, we would be, the reason we would be going about this route is we are looking to get a life insurance policy that's going to give that type of a monthly benefit, a death benefit size enough that would replicate that survivorship payout, if not even greater. And in their scenario, I was able to show them a number that we would far surpass what we would be able to pull from the survivorship option in the pension, and do it with the same amount of money at this 225 a month, if not even less. And so I'll kind of pause there. I mean, Tyson, what would you maybe want me to kind of talk on next or kind
Well,
of
let's just
cover?
stop right there. And are you guys all following this logic here? Steve, have you heard of a concept like this before?
No.
Are you getting the concept though?
Um, Not really.
Okay, that's okay. This takes a few times to get, and it'll be helpful. Alec, do you have numbers you can show of this? Anything you can kind of show off the top of your head?
I don't I do, but I don't know where, like, I don't have something on like a PDF document to pull up real quick. I mean, what I could
So
do is like
I
open a
I
Word.
might I could chime in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, to everything that Alec is saying, I've actually back in 2020 when we were all locked in our offices and forced to look at camera screens, I made my own video about this topic. I'm not sure if I've ever shared that with you, Alec, but I kept it as general as possible to kind of keep the how pensions work concept to kind of mirror the how money works concept. So it's very general, very high level, but I could throw that video out to our group just as a way to share. I mean, it's
Yeah, why don't you
me,
send it
so
to me first so I can check it? But let's do this. Alec, can you just we're gonna do this in real time. Can you give me the pension, the total pension amount was how much?
The total pension amount was $3,461.
So why don't you guys play along at home and get a pen and paper out and we're gonna kind of do this together. So so we're gonna call that the monthly pension for life. And then the survivorship option, was that 100% replacement of that pension or 50%?
I would say 50%. The app that they were showing me these numbers gave zero like details. It just said if you chose a survivorship, it just showed a dollar amount of that 1904. And then it just
Okay.
said in parentheses costs $225.
So write these three numbers down, guys, and we're just gonna kind of do this real time. So here's the setup. The husband can retire and he's forced to make a decision. And every pensioner, when they are 6 to 12 months away from retirement, and this is for a traditional defined benefit pension. Defined benefit means the pension system is defining your benefit no matter what. And what the variable equation is while you're working is they might have you pay more or less along the way to get you to that promised payout. A defined contribution would be like a 401k. That's where what you put is controlled by you, but whatever that grows to is the variable. So you guys understand that you'll hear those two terms, defined benefit, defined contribution. So his defined benefit is $3,461 a month, guaranteed no matter what happens in the market, no matter how long he lives, for the rest of his life. Okay, that's the beauty of a pension. So let me stop right there. What is that pension worth? Well, if we think about if he had to save in his own 401k enough money to pull out $3,461 a month, how would we even ballpark the value of that pension? This isn't really necessary from the math of what we're doing, but often I'll do this to help clients understand the gravity of this decision, and I help them see that this is their biggest financial asset in a lot of cases. So 3461 times 12 is $41,532 a year. If we assume this guy's 65, just to make it easy, if he had a guaranteed annuity that paid him 5% a year lifetime benefit, we could do that math. If he didn't have an annuity, probably the most he could pull out would be 4% a year. So if we just take the 41,532 and divide by 0.05, that means that if he had $830,000 and he sent that to an annuity company and they paid him 5% for life, in other words, if he went to an annuity company and said, "Hey, how much do I have to pay you, or how much do I have to transfer in order for you on your benefit rider at 5% for life to send me 41,532?" And they're going to tell him, "You need to send us $830,640." Are you guys understanding how that math works? So I could look at my client and I'm doing this on my iPhone, like just real simple. And sometimes like real time simple calculations are so effective in front of a client. I think sometimes when we have these like really fancy charts and graphs and everything's prepared in this page, like people can't track that. But people need to understand why we're doing this before they're going to agree to do it. And so we're going to have to take a complex subject and make it pretty simple. So let's just start right off the bat. Hey, Mr. Client, your pension's worth over $800,000. And you'll see the eyes just light up at people. They're like, "Wow, I had no idea it was worth that much." But you help them see that. And by the way, if they didn't have that guaranteed rider and we only had a 4% distribution, then the idea would be we'd have to have even more, right? If we're gonna take out less as a percentage. So if you take out 41,532 divided by 0.04, that's 1,038,000. So I think you could tell this client, "Hey, this pension's worth between 800,000 and $1 million, depending on some factors." And so this is a very important decision to make, right? You're sitting on $1 million asset here, okay? So then we talk about, okay, if you have $1 million, let's just say you have a lake house worth $1 million, and let's just say you inherited it, but it's yours, no mortgage, it's free and clear, it's your asset. So you're not required to have insurance on it, but insurance costs you a couple grand a year. What do you think? Are you going to pay the insurance premium to protect your $1 million asset? Or are you going to be like, "Yeah, I don't want to pay 2,500 bucks a year. I'm just going to like chance that it doesn't burn down." What do you think?
Bring
Clients
with
be
the
like, "Well, of
insurance.
course I'd insure it, right? I would want to protect the value of the asset that I have. It'd be crazy not to." Great, I totally agree. So I want to protect the value of this pension for your family. Okay. So step one is I'm establishing like the gravity, the scale, the size, the importance of this decision. And now they're tracking with you. Now we're both on the same page going down this journey together. Okay, so now let's talk about what's the most efficient way of protecting this. Well, the pension system is required to give you at least one option. It's what's called a survivorship option. And so that basically means, and we're just going to call it Jim and Cindy here. So, Jim, this is guaranteed the rest of your life. And we're going to simplify this today. So, we're ignoring things like taxes and cost of living adjustments and stuff like that. But we're guaranteeing this pension the rest of your life, no matter how long you live, no questions asked. Even if you live 100 till you're 105, and we end up paying you more than you ever paid in, that's the nature of a pension. Because some people pay in for 30 years and pass away early. That's just the nature of that. But what happens if, Jim, you pass away? What about Cindy? Well, you can either choose a single life annuity, which means we're going to pay you 41,532 a year for as long as you live, and then when you pass away, Cindy gets nothing. So on its own, that's a huge risk, right? Because this is your biggest financial asset, let's assume. But if you want to make sure Cindy continues getting coverage, we're gonna give you this survivorship option. That survivorship option means if you pass away, Jim, she's gonna get 1904 a month, so less. You've passed away, so she doesn't need 100% of that replacement. So basically, you've got sorry, my phone's blowing up here. So you got a close to a 50% replacement, whatever that math is. So she gets 1904, but we're not going to just provide that because of the kindness of our hearts. We have to now we're insuring two lives, right? The odds of just one of you living to a certain point is, X number of years, but the odds of two lives making it a longer period of time collectively is obviously greater. So we're going to charge you $225 a month for that benefit. Okay, you guys got it? So here I say it exactly this way every single time. Here's what I say. So, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, Jim and Cindy, what kind of financial product does this sound like? You're basically paying $225 a month in the form of receiving 225 less. So it's no different than they pay you and then you got to write a check every month, right? So you're paying $225 a month for a benefit to Cindy if Jim passes away. What does that sound like to you? And roughly half the time, the prospect says, well, it kind of sounds like life insurance. I'm like, you're exactly right. It's life insurance. The other half the time, people just look at me like confused, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, no problem. I'd be like, hey, it kind of sounds like life insurance, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I have fun with this. Sometimes I'll get a cocky husband and be like, I'm not buying life insurance, And sometimes if I don't recommend this till you get a little more seasoned because you got to know how to read the room. But there have been times when I've looked at the husband and said, "Oh, yes, you are. In fact, whether you want to or not, you're buying life insurance." And they look at me weird, and I'm like, let me help you understand why. So you're either going to do it on your own or you're going to do it through the pension system. But I don't think Cindy, and I look right at the wife, is going to sign the piece of paper and get it notarized that says that, hey, if you pass away, I have nothing. And that I don't have to continue that conversation very far for the husband to realize what's happening. And the wife goes, oh yeah, like I need to make sure I'm protected, right? So the idea here would be we're going to buy life insurance to protect the value of this pension, just like in our lake house example, we're going to pay homeowners insurance for as long as we live that lake house. Now, if we ever sell the lake house, do we need to keep paying the insurance premium? Of course not, right? So this example really holds up. But the idea here is now let's identify, okay, what's the value of that 1904? What's the value of that survivorship option? Well, we're going to do the same thing we just did with the pension. What's 1904 times 12? Anybody give me that number?
22,848.
Okay, so how much, if we assume a 5% distribution rate, how much would we need to have to replace that survivorship number?
457,000.
Okay. So on one hand, we could say the value of that survivorship is worth $457,000. But I don't quite view the survivorship the same way as the full pension because of this. The full pension, we're starting at 60, 62, 65, whatever it is, right? So this is a lifetime income scenario. This is a pension that in most cases is going to pay out 20, 25, 30, 35 years. You guys follow me? So we can't, we got to take a lower distribution rate in order to have that money last your entire life. I mean, no annuity company is going to pay you 8% for life at age 65, right? There's a reason for it. They would lose money. Okay. But in a survivorship option, we have to make some assumptions. Probably the husband doesn't pass away until both of them are into their 70s or maybe their 80s. And of course, there's going to be tail risk scenarios here where the husband dies, day one of retirement and that kind of stuff. But the idea would be probably the survivor spouse isn't going to outlive the husband by like 30 years. Does that make sense? So I just kind of in my mind say, okay, if the surviving spouse, the widow, outlasts her husband by maybe 10 to 15 years, I'm making that number up. I don't have data to prove it to you. And even if I did, that doesn't mean that that's going to happen in this particular case. But I think most people would just say, yeah, that makes sense to me. So if we only need to have that survivorship payment for a shorter time, what does that mean we can do on the distribution rate? Does that mean we can take out a higher percentage or a lower percentage?
Higher percentage.
That's right. So, in other words, let me make it real simple. If you said, Tyson, I only need a payment for 10 years, just an isolated hypothetical example, I could say, well, I can guarantee you 10% a year for 10 years, right? Pretty easy. Oh, I'm just returning your capital. So I think forever, I've always used 8% as a distribution rate for the survivorship payout. And that allows me to get less life insurance to protect that survivorship. So if we take out that 1904, we'll do it together, times 12, 22,848 divide by 0.08, that's 285,000. You guys follow me there? So I don't want to go any further before we understand this aspect. Do you guys understand how I'm doing these basic math calculations? All right.
Yeah.
So I do want to cover one other element that's important. So there's two other factors at play. One factor is cost of living. So let's just say we settle on 285 to protect 1904 a year. But if that 1904 is growing a little bit with the cost of living adjustments of the pension, in 20 years, that 285 probably isn't going to be enough money. So we need to think about that. So that would be an argument to have more life insurance. But then the counter argument to that would be think about taxes for a minute. A pension payment is taxable income to the pensioner, right? They're not going to see all that money. That's income tax that's hitting their, federal schedule 1040, and they got to pay tax on that money. And usually most people have other assets and other things happening. So the idea is I always assume about 20% in tax because they have outside their standard deduction, most people have no other deductions against their income. And this is a little bit of a smaller pension. I mean, routinely we see pensions that are 60, 70, 80,000 a year, teachers and all that. So the idea would be if we assume 20% in tax, then 42,000, whatever that number was to begin with, we really don't need 800,000 to a million because think about it, life insurance is a tax-free death benefit, right? There's no tax due on that payment. So I'm kind of netting those two things out. On one hand, I could get away with 20% less coverage than let's call it the 285 for the survivorship because it's tax-free. On the other hand, I want to err a little higher to give a little buffer for cost of living adjustments. So that's where I kind of arrive at that 8% kind of gets me to that number. Are you guys following that? All right. And now the last thing, which we'll come back to in probably next week, is when we design a policy, we can actually build in an increasing benefit, which also helps us account for the inflation idea. But I definitely don't want to leave a widow high and dry. And you guys kind of understand, I think, just by going through this exercise, why we must use permanent insurance. I mean, we must, because we can't replace a lifetime pension with a temporary term. Because what happens in 20 years where that term expires and then all of a sudden the wife's protection just expired, right? So this is a perfect example. I mean, this is where I'd go toe to toe with Dave Ramsey and frankly kick his ass on this because the math just doesn't bear out, right?
Can I
Um,
actually touch on that real quick? Because
yeah.
that was a question that was brought up. She said, "Why can't we just get a humongous term policy and invest a bunch of money, and then we can figure it out from there?" And so I had said, "Hey, the day that that term policy is done, it's done." And so if we go and get a $500,000 plus of term coverage, even for 30 years, the second that policy is done, we don't get that coverage anymore. And yes, we can invest money in a side account or whatever, but we have a lot of factors to come in. Specifically, what if we need to touch this money in the short term? What if we have poor market performance? What if we have a downturn in the market? all those types of things. And so she had said, hey, the same thing can be said about the cash value, right? And I had showed her, hey, as long as this policy is in force, there's still a death benefit. We were looking 25 years out, and it was the net death benefit was over $500,000. And I said, as long as this policy is in force, you still get that death benefit. What you're referring to is the cash value. So that could go down to nothing, in an investment account. But as long as this policy is in force, you still have the cash value plus access to the death benefit. And that's why we would need to do this in a permanent policy outside of a term. Those are two very different
And what was her
things.
reaction to that?
She just kind of sat there. It was just kind of
So
like
that
a
tells you she's still processing that. So first of all,
correct.
in that scenario, people have this like mental image of term being really cheap, but when we're having a conversation with somebody's like in their upper 40s or early 50s, it's not as cheap as they think it is. And second of all, you address a lot of the points. I mean, not to turn this into a Dave Ramsey thing, because Dave Ramsey is actually right about a lot of stuff. But in a perfect world, um, you know, people could be self-insured by the time they're 60 and have term until then, and everything's paid off, and they got 2.2 million in their investment accounts, and they're set. But we just don't live in a perfect world. Market crashes, terrible investment decisions, people, have to help their kids out through college and stop saving, or they borrow from retirement, and all kinds of reasons where life doesn't always end up the way we projected on a spreadsheet 25 years later, right? And so that's just why we need to bring certainty to this, because I never, and I say this to clients a lot, I never want to take away a guaranteed income scenario and replace it with a non-guaranteed income scenario. I would not be doing my job as a fiduciary advisor if I increased your risk from something guaranteed to something non-guaranteed when you need it the most. That would be reckless. Okay. And when I say things like that, people are like, yeah, I get it. Makes sense. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and so when you're genuine and transparent with people, they get that. So the idea is we're isolating, okay, but let's get back to here's the last key point I want to end on today. And then you guys can go back and review this recording, think about this. And here's, by the way, just like Lisa did with Everest, hey, YouTube pension maximization, go watch 15 videos on it and see what other people say. There's not a lot of controversy on this topic, but you'll get some people that are just against whole life. And so it just turns into more of like a whole life conversation than a pension max case. We're not even talking about the product we're using here yet. But the idea would be, go research it. Sometimes people, you see it, in a well-produced video, you kind of, it clicks, right? But the idea here would be, what's the problem with traditional survivorship benefits? The problem is from a math standpoint, it only really works mathematically if the pensioner dies relatively young and the widow lives a long time. So in other words, just from a pure math standpoint, if you follow with me, one of four scenarios is likely to happen. Either husband and wife pass away, both of them pass away relatively early into retirement, or they both live relatively long lives well past life expectancy, or the husband passes away and the wife outlives for a period of time, or the wife passes away and the husband outlives for a period of time. So do you guys agree that those are generally the four kind of broad-based scenarios that are going to happen here? So the idea would be, of those four scenarios, if you do traditional survivorship, if let's just say you give up this 225 a month for a couple of years, and then the pensioner passes away and the wife collects $1,900 for the rest of a month for the rest of her life. I mean, from a math standpoint, she hit a home run, right? In terms of premium she paid to benefit she received. You guys get that? But what happens if she passes away at some point, at any point before he does, then there is zero value ever received by that family for the all that premiums paid. You guys understand that? So that's the problem with that scenario. If they both pass away relatively early in retirement, then this 800,000 to $1 million pension vanishes. This asset doesn't go on to kids. There's no contingent survivor. This is a spousal continuation only. So I'd argue you worked your entire life building up this pension and boom, it vanishes if you both die in a car wreck or something like that, right? And then the flip side, the rosiest scenario, and I'll say that to clients like, hey, I know this is a lot of doom and gloom, but hey, let's assume great things. You both live a long time. So you've been paying that 225 for your whole life. And then, if let's just assume they're the same age to make it easy. If husband dies when he's 89, I mean, is she going to outlive him another 15 years to recoup all those premiums? And even if she did on mathematically, how valuable would that extra money be in her 90s when she's probably in an assisted living facility on her own or some sort of managed care situation? Does that make sense? So once I plant the seeds of doubt and I help people understand, hey, the default option with your pension system really only protects one of these four major scenarios, but it doesn't really do anything for these other three. That's why I want to help you control more of this cash so that in any four of these scenarios, you guys come out ahead. Okay? And so we're going to pause there because we've covered a lot today. If I go into this next whole round of like using life insurance, I think it's going to be too much in one setting. So I want you guys to, if you're taking this seriously, review this recording, do some independent research online, Google pension maximization, and just see where that takes you. And let's reconvene next week, and we're going to pick up right from here and talk about how does involving a properly designed permanent life policy address all four of these scenarios, and just build this knowledge base. So does that make sense? All right. Anything else anybody wants to share as we're wrapping up here today, or any questions on what we've covered so far? All right, you
So
guys.
I
Well,
have
we'll pick
good.
it up next Tuesday, and appreciate y'all, and let's keep up with our great momentum here.
Thanks.